Hello, everyone. My name is Julia Ferrioli. It is May 16th of 2023. I don't like to admit that part. And I am here today with Filippo Valsorda, and we are talking about maintainership and which is most appropriate because this is maintainer month. Um,
Is it now?
it is May is maintainer month apparently, so we are right on topic.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for having me. And I just tried to tab out that website that tells you what day of March 2020 it is to make a joke about that. And I didn't pull it up, but fast enough. But yeah, I feel you on not admitting it's 2023.
COVIDstandardtime.com, I believe, is the one that I typically reference.
There you go.
Yes. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Filippo and I work on Go and cryptography. I think that's the most general seminar of what I work on now. I've been on the Go team and at times head of the Go security team from 2018 to 2022. And I still work as a maintainer of the cryptography packages in the Go standard library. And along with that, I maintain tools like MakeCert, a generator for locally trusted certificates, and Age, a file encryption tool. Before that, I was at Cloudflare, and where I worked on cryptography and Go, and that's a bit how what led me into the Go open source project. And before that, I maintained for a little while YouTube DL in sort of a past life, which is a thing that's not really associated with my uh, profile anymore. But let's just say that when the RIAA tried to get YouTube DL off GitHub was an eventful month.
I remember that library. I did not know you were the maintainer of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
the maintainers just were super welcoming to this. I think high school. Yes, high school kid that just showed up and started moving things around. And I remember finding out from reading the Python source, because it was not documented at the time, that you could make a zip file and execute it like a Python script, and it would run and so that allowed us to stop distributing literally just a giant Python file, because YouTube DL used to be a giant single file. And yeah, it's such a weird project. Really loved it. It grew so fast with the community, adding modules, and was all self-contained and public domain licensed. So you could not use any libraries. So we had to implement everything, including RSA verification for the updates, which might have been one of the first cryptographic bugs I ever introduced.
Wow. I am learning so I feel like I want the story behind that at some point. Cuz that sounds
Uh,
fascinating.
yep, I promise to bring it some other time.
um well, so we do like to start these with a little bit of a fun question, but actually I am wondering what was your first programming language?
My first programming language was MediaWiki templates.
Oh,
That's going to be my stake in what counts as a programming language. There you go. Because it had ifs and you could build things with it. And by sort of abusing also how the MediaWiki software worked, you could make entire workflows where an editor would just put a template substitution, and that would kick off a series of operations. And yeah, I started in the Wikipedia community, Italian Wikipedia, and moved on to JavaScript tools for the monobook, which was the skin before this one, before that one, of Wikipedia, and like little JavaScript tools for editors to streamline things, and eventually Python bots, and eventually YouTube DL Python.
when did you get introduced to statically typed languages?
Oh, that's a very good question. Huh. What was my first start with? So I remember trying and failing to get the Linux kernel to compile or write something for the Linux kernel at least 3 times in my early, let's call it career, but just interactions with computers. Um, so that was an attempt that failed. Um, huh. I think it might have, in fact, been Go. I think I might have written a little C++ to use OpenCV to make some
Sure.
hello world for the image recognition, like
Mhm.
something that recognized where a red ball was in a video or something like that. But no, after that, it might have been Go, which a person at the Recurse Center just showed me this exciting new language, took me aside at one of the events of the Recurse Center and just showed me this thing. And by the way, I'm going to throw an ad for the Recurse Center in there because it's a community I owe so much to. And the Recurse Center is like a writer's retreat, but for programmers. And it's one of the kindest communities I know. And you can go and just learn and become a better programmer in a self-directed way for a few weeks or a few months. It really gave me a lot, including showing me Go, which I remember thinking, yeah, that's interesting, but I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing now. And then months later, I picked it up for something, and one thing led to another.
And now you're one of a core contributor to Go, which is very cool.
It's exciting. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I actually started with statically typed languages, which I think shows my age more than anything, because Python was this, upstart and wasn't really taught at that point in time. But so okay, you are a cryptographer, which is an
I,
area I know very little about. So this is going to be a
um,
fun conversation.
um, I I always say that if we do our job well, that should be the consequence. Nobody else should need to know about this. I also think that it's often depicted as a more esoteric and almost shamanic thing than it is.
Yeah.
Uh, but yep, I eventually, I think, accepted to wear the hat of cryptographer, although there's a whole discourse around at what point can you call yourself a cryptographer.
I picture in my head like lots of functions uh, with data going in and out, and one, yeah, yes. So unfortunately, this is not video, but I see the whiteboard in the background with lots of with functions, probably.
Yep,
So
boxes and drawing and
yeah,
keys going into Cha-Cha 20, Poly 1305,
yeah.
and yep.
uh,
um,
so when we talk about like open source and maintainership, we often talk about the um, cultivating a community and nurturing contributors, etc. But I realize that when you're talking about stuff that's used in security, it's probably a bit different. What is that like for you?
there's a tension. So I both fall on the camp of don't roll your own crypto is more harmful than helpful as a saying, because the overconfident people don't listen to it, and the people who are good but lack self-confidence listen to it, and that those are two negatives. So it neither stops people from doing things they shouldn't, but at the same time stops people from believing in themselves. Um, but at the same time, it I was realizing this while reading some of the previous episodes, that I do have a very different experience with maintainership than maintainers of, I guess, projects in other fields or other areas, because a lot of my job is saying no, and I know that that's true of kind of all maintainers that have a clear idea for their project, but in my case, I almost always want people to file an issue and never, ever, ever open a PR because I am probably not going to merge it.
Mhm.
Um, and as I was thinking about how to talk about this, I worry that will all sound extremely arrogant. But a problem that we have is that we need to keep a standard of correctness that's extremely high. And that's doesn't necessarily mean that other people can't maintain it, but you need a coherent style to do that sometimes, even more than in other projects. So, and you need to be deeply familiar with all the parts of the code base. Oftentimes, the security expert is just the person who knows the system better than whoever else designed it or interacts with it. And so the result is that you want to have written that code, or people who you know the style of and you already have an ongoing and long-lasting relationship with. So the result is that I have this view of contributions too that it's a little skewed. I don't feel like contributing PRs is necessarily a contribution that reduces burden on maintainers. I always found the refrain of, well, if you're using that project, you should contribute back. Kind of. Actually, contributing back is something that will require more effort from the maintainer to review things, to ensure that they're correct. And I think this is more true in my line of work, because I need to make sure that anything that touches the cryptography libraries, we can manage that complexity budget, and that we can test it very effectively, and that it doesn't interact poorly with other things. It's not an unsafe API that will cause the next 10 years of Go developers to shoot themselves in the foot. And so there's all this extra work on every contribution. But I guess it's true in all projects in some way. It's just maybe the balance is different when you work on security.
Yeah, and I want to dig into one of the words that you're using, which is correct. Um, because I think that, you know, in this context, we've got a like capital C correct versus a lower C correct, where it has a special meaning. Can you explain what you mean by correct here?
So I'm laughing because while maybe in this conversation I'm the one that has the concept of a correct with a capital C versus the common one. I'm just back from last month, Real World Crypto, which is this conference where academics and cryptography engineers meet. And over there, I am way on the side of the implementer, of the engineer, of the... When I'm at Real World Crypto, I don't call myself a cryptographer, because the ones who like write the proofs and do hyperelliptic curves to do isogenes-based post-quantum cryptography are there, and they're the real cryptographers. And I gave a whole talk where the non-hidden goal, not too hidden goal, was to shift the Overton window towards, maybe we should focus on correct with a lowercase c sometimes. Because when you go there, they'll talk about formal methods and formal proofs of correctness and proving with mathematical models that the program is correct. And in my experience, that helps. And we use some of that in Go, and like the NIST elliptic curve implementations are from a project called Fiat Crypto, which does mathematical models of correctness. But also, what finds a lot of bugs that contributes so much to the security track record of Go, which is, and here I say with hopefully not angering anyone, is better than the average cryptography library out there, and not mostly. I can't take most of the credit for that. A lot of it is Go. A lot of it is the design of my predecessor. But you know what works? Tests. We write tests, and then we run tests, and then we write more test cases and test framework to make writing more test cases easier, and then test more things, and then we find bugs. And that's extremely boring, so it's kind of hard to get a conference to accept a talk about the fact that, we write a bunch of tests. It's pretty great. And another section of the talk was, we try to keep the code very readable, because that way we spot the bugs better. And of course, to a room full of mathematicians who write formal proofs of correctness and who are very confused why you won't use their assembly generated by this imperscrutable model written in Coq, and that's truly the name of the language. And that's just, and you're just, well, that's great, but it doesn't integrate in my build system, and I can't ship that to users. And so instead, I'm going to write a bunch of Go and make it very readable. And yep. So very lowercase c, huh?
It's very different worlds for sure. But what do you mean when you say the word correct?
Well, in cryptography, thankfully, we do have a spec to compare to. So job one is making sure that given the correct inputs, given certain inputs, it gives the correct output per the spec. That's surprisingly not sufficient, because oftentimes the spec is underspecified. And we're having a whole conversation in the industry about how to write specs that are more implementer friendly and that are more complete, that are more testable. And then there's a whole host of other issues like side channel attacks, and deciding which ones are in scope and which ones are not. And things just already get very fuzzy because, for example, the Go standard library does nothing to protect against power side channel attacks. Because most servers don't have somebody an attacker that's tapped on the power line that can measure the differences in power. But if you have a smart card, smart cards are made to keep a key secret on the card while power is provided by an adversary environment. So there, if you can measure the power consumption, and the power consumption of doing 0 + 1 is less than doing 1 + 1, then you can find bits by doing that. And then you do that analysis, and now it leaked. Now, is code that doesn't protect against power side channels correct? Depends on your threat model. Exactly. And then it gets even more in the weeds because when you get away from cryptography and into security. For example, this also speaks to interactions with the community and to running an open source project. I used to be behind security at Golang.org, so see all the reports, and I still collaborate on some. And so many of them are, well, if I deploy this thing in this setting, and since we provide a standard library, it can be used in so many different settings, and we can't control them all. It's not an application. It's then it's vulnerable to this sort of attack. An example: if I open up the NetHTTP server to the internet and people can just upload unlimited amounts of data, I will run out of memory. Correct. But at the same time, if we pick a cap for how much you can upload, suddenly if you wrote, I don't know, the YouTube backend, which I'm mentioning because I don't think it's actually written in Go, but where you, well, some of it, maybe, I don't know. I have no insider knowledge. Where you are uploading a video, you certainly want the cap to be higher than whatever I would have picked. So what is the correct cap? What is the correct API that protects, that's secure, that protects users? And there we got away from there's clearly a correct to it's a gray area. You have to define your threat model to there just isn't a correct answer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, a lot of the work.
Whoa. Okay. That is a lot. That is a lot of work, actually.
Yep. It was a lot of my time when I was on the Go team, and it's a lot, still a lot of the effort of the folks on the Go security team, and it's fundamentally a unsolvable problem. Cryptography, you can get it right. You can keep improving the tests and readability and all the different techniques, but there's a arriving point.
It seems like it's always a moving target, almost.
It is. Yep.
Yeah.
Also because people weren't deploying things in ways that now they are deploying in, and we still have the same API because we have the Go 1 compatibility promise that says that we'll never change an API,
right?
Never remove an API. And that means that we're still maintaining stuff from 10 years ago.
Yeah. I feel like other languages have run into this as well. The shift from Python 2 to Python 3, for instance, maybe? Yes.
Yep. Go made a very explicit decision, in part after learning from Python, not to do a break. The famous refrain, when is Go 2 coming? Well, Go 2 is not coming, and at the same time, Go 2 is the set of carefully iterated, backwards compatible changes that are happening over the years. And like generics are here now.
Right. Right. So let's talk about the kind of experiences that you have running or maintaining security cryptography focused open source projects. How are they different? How are they unique in terms of like the day-to-day operations?
As I mentioned, there's a lot of saying no, and that angers users, and I get it, because usually a project the only goal it has is to be useful, right? So if a user comes and says it would be more useful if it did this thing too, you have to worry about maintainability, and you have to worry about whether it's in scope, and you have to worry about whether you're making a Swiss Army knife or a precision scalpel. But still, the baseline decision-making process is, would this make it more useful? Instead, when somebody contributes something to Age or to the Go cryptography standard library, the first concern is, will this keep serving as a tool to build secure applications for all the existing users and all the future users? And it's hard to... Oftentimes we say no, even just because we don't know how to do it correctly yet. Or because it's clear how to do it and it's doable, but it's just so much work that it can't be done with that extra care and extra carefulness for correctness and testing and readability and everything else that needs to go on top of it. And so, yeah, there is less joy maybe in those interactions in a way, because there isn't this, which I remember instead from YouTube DL, of people just throwing stuff over and being like, yeah, let's put it in, or like, yeah, let's change it like that so it's even better, and let's merge it, and like the thing just growing and growing and organically. Instead, there's this strong control that needs to be kept, because there is an expectation of security, of correctness, of also safety. Go has the Russ Coxon encouraged me to write down what drives the decisions, and we wrote it down as the Go cryptography standard libraries have to be secure, safe, practical, and modern, in that order. So you have to first think if you can make it secure, then you have to think if it would be safe to provide to users, then you have the practical, which usually most projects will tell you that security is the first concern, but honestly, I don't think that's true, and I think that's okay. Like, for many projects, I know it coming from a security person, security is a trade-off. It always is. It's a how much do you want to invest in, and how much. And for many projects, it doesn't make sense to invest in security as much as for an encryption tool.
Mm-hmm.
That's natural. That's okay.
Mm-hmm.
So the trade-offs end up being different.
That makes perfect sense. I mean, for most projects, the security comes by way of their dependencies, right?
And their platforms.
And the platforms, for sure. We're not. Most of us are not hosting our own servers anymore.
Yep. And so don't have to think about a lot of things around side channels, around denial of service, around so many different things, which is great. I love seeing tools for people to build things that are just based on the joy of exploring things and don't require thinking about, will this be secure at every single step? And I think it's a sign of a mature technology. Case in point, LLMs, like ChatGPT and all these large language models are not a mature technology, and you see it because there isn't a tool set to make them secure. You have to assume they will just can be made to do whatever. There's these great articles by Simon W. I know him by handle. I think I know the surname, but I'm not going to say
Simon
it.
Wilson.
Wilson, thank you.
Yes.
About all the different ways you can get large language models to do things that weren't meant to do, and how we don't have an answer as an industry. And it's so... it reminds me so much of the 90s for programs, before we knew to separate very clearly user data and instructions, never doing band signaling, all these hard-learned lessons that now with prompt engineering have gone completely out the window, which I don't think is necessarily an indictment. It's a new technology. We haven't figured out how to do those yet.
It's true. It's true. So it does seem like, because of the understandable nature of your projects, it's got to be a little bit more like taxing from a personal and emotional and sheer joy level.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was wondering if, like, how do you cope with that, or is it as taxing as it sounds, or?
Yeah, I read a Skeep. Is that how we're calling them on Blue Sky?
I think so, because nobody's checked Urban Dictionary.
Yeah, all right. I read a post on
there we go.
on Blue Sky the other day that was along the lines of making your vocation based on risk assessment is taxing. And I definitely see this in the InfoSec community in general, which I guess writ large includes security project maintainers and cryptographers. And it definitely showed up, for example, with the pandemic. Some of the people who took it most systematically were the people that I knew in the security community, because they went into risk assessment mode. And it's kind of hard not to be in risk assessment mode, which, yeah, it's a thing that you have to cope with and come to terms with. Cryptography has the advantage that there's also a lot of space for perfectionism. So in that, I find joy in the crafting. Programmers often talk about the fact that they have to control the urge to make something perfect. They have to move on to the thing once it's good enough. Well, I picked the job where I can instead, no, 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 no. I'm going to spend 3 more days on these 200 lines of code to make sure they're very well tested. And then I'm going to blog about it. And I'm going to be proud of having spent this much time. And people are going to be happy I did, including whoever does my performance review, which these days is nobody. But
You. Unless you have a
well,
pet. Do you have a pet?
wait, does a pet usually involve performance reviews?
I mean, my dog tells me what to do all the time, so she gives me continuous feedback.
Maybe I should get a dog.
You should get a dog, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm allergic to dogs, but I'm
Oh,
sure
well,
I can find a pet that will ask me. What were your blockers,
yeah.
and where do you see yourself in 3 months?
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean that is what pets do, right? That's normal. Um,
I'll accept that at face
yeah,
value. um,
yeah.
yeah, so there is joy in the perfectionism in a way. There's definitely a close-knit community that forms, so I regularly talk to all of the people that do implementation of cryptography. We used to joke that we all fit in a room. We used to all fit in a room. 10 years ago, Eurocrypto was probably the entire field in a room. These days it's a little bigger, but yep, still. And at the same time, yeah, from on the open source side, there are a lot of interactions where you have to tell people, no, we're not merging that. No, we can't have that feature. No, that's not a vulnerability. Or sometimes, oh yes, thank you, that's a vulnerability. Thank you. But it is different. It's definitely different.
Mm-hmm. So we are quickly running out of time, and this is a fascinating conversation. I would love to kind of keep going in this vein, but you have transitioned, and you've spoken about this. You've transitioned into being a professional maintainer, and moreover, a professional maintainer of some extremely critical libraries. Um, do you have words of advice for people looking to go down a similar path?
So I want to get there because the reason I did this transition myself wasn't really that I wanted to change something for my own work. I basically work on the same stuff with the same people as I did when I was employed at Google. The difference is that Google is not paying me, and there are fewer performance reviews. So I appreciate the changes, but the main motivator was figuring out a model and a path for other maintainers to open to other maintainers. So I want to get to a place where I can say, here's how you do it, all the way down to making it into a playbook, because I think that's what's missing from the role. It's not a profession, because if you decide that you want to be a dentist, you go to dentistry school, and then you either start an apprenticeship in a bigger dentist clinic, or you start your own thing in an underserved market. And then at some point, you either make your own thing, but in the meantime, you've taken trainings and you've had a countless, endless queue of vendors try to sell you managerial software and tools to run your clinic. And then you hire an assistant who specializes in that and who worked on maybe a different clinic and helps you run the place administratively. And all these things are well documented, well trodden paths, and even more institutional things, like you walk into a bank and you say, I'm a dentist, I would like to start a dentistry clinic, I think you want to lend me some money for that. And they'll say, yes, we understand dentistry, and here's how we're going to assess you and give you some money to start a clinic. None of that is available for maintainers.
No.
You luck into a project, I guess, or you like I did with YouTube DL, or you start something that happens to become popular and nobody tells you the risks of the job or the complexities of the job. And then at some point, you are a critical part of the internet infrastructure and nobody's paying you for it, unless maybe you do get hired and then you do work at a company on that, but maybe at some point the company loses interest in that, or is the project outgrows the interest the company has in it, which is natural. These infrastructural things grow bigger than a single company. That's actually a success scenario, but unfortunately oftentimes they lead to churn and strain. So this was a very long way to say, no, I don't have advice yet for somebody who wants to do this and doesn't already have an idea of starting down this path. So I've talked to a number of people who have already started down this path, and we've compared notes and we've exchanged tips and like strategies. And then at the stage where I think I can be useful in facilitating the path that somebody already took. But I'm not ready yet to tell people, okay, this is a path that now exists, that companies understand, that you can take and follow like a career. But that's where we should get to, because this is a fundamental profession of our century, and it is something that we need for keeping the infrastructure of the internet up and running and alive. And I think that all of the other things we want from open source, like more security or more reliability or more anything, will need to come through a professionalization of the role. And there will be many different models. There will be small firms, big firms, independent maintainers. I think we'll see them all, just like we see many different models for dentists and lawyers. And so I'm hoping to be back, in a year or two and pitching, this online course or this specific way to get started. But for now, I'm experimenting with it, how to figure out what works, and how to prove that it does. Because you'd be surprised who the most skeptical people and hardest to convince were. You might think, oh, was it your clients that you had to convince to pay? Was it their finance department that you had to convince to just enroll you like a vendor? Was it legal, where you had to convince them to not make you sign an IP assignment? Because no, I can't assign you all my IP because I have multiple clients. Nope. Maintainers.
Yeah.
Other maintainers, they'll absolutely tell me this will never work, and if it works, it only works because it works only for you. And I mean, I have lots of privileges here. I had a financial situation that allowed me to start on this. I have a personal brand, like lots of things that makes it easier, lots of things that make it harder because it's a fresh model that companies don't understand. I think those things will offset each other, but still, maintainers were always so skeptical. And I get it. It's almost PTSD, because we've had years and years and years of being told that our work matters, but nobody paying for it. And then telling them, well, then pay us. And then that didn't happen. And then platforms came along and said, we will get you paid. And that never worked.
No.
So I totally get it. And when I say I think this is going to work, I hear back from companies sometimes who are like, yes, all right, let's do this. Here's some money. And maintainers who are like, that will never work. Why are you suggesting this? And I get it. Hopefully, we'll make it easier and easier and easier until it's clear that it's a thing you can do.
Well, I can't wait to come back in a couple years' time and hear all about it.
Sounds good.
Well, thank you so much for coming on Open Source Stories and telling yours, or at least one of them, one of many, I'm sure. So
thank you. I really appreciated this talk.
Yeah. Well, and thank you everyone for listening and or reading this open source story, and we'll see you next time.